We're hearing here how a person, a ruler in this case, how he lived a dharmic lifestyle and engaged in a dharmic way. And he also engaged his followers in that dharmic, you could say lifestyle, you can say practices. And through that, they gained blessings. This verse said how he became satisfied and happy. And that's this, in one sense, the search for happiness is just the basic nature of every living being, right? It's by nature we seek happiness. That's nothing too mysterious, but in one sense, it's something profound to think about, right? And our confusion is where we look for it. Generally, we look for it by the contact of the senses with the objects of the senses. Those that were with me this morning on Wisdom of the Sages were reading about this, how Lord Vishnu creates the material realm. And within that material realm, there's the creation of the senses and the objects of the senses. And then along with that, there's the mind. And along with that, there's the false ego. And with all this equipment, you get plugged into your equipment, and then you take your senses and you search for contact with sense objects that will be pleasing according to the programming of the mind, right? And that becomes our adventure in this world. We search for it here. If we don't find it here, we search for it there. We search for happiness over here. We find a little, but then we find it slips away. So then we start to search over here. And the mind is always engaged in saying, how can I connect these senses to this right objects so I will feel happiness? But the Gita is going to say that happiness, the happiness that's derived from the contact of the senses with the objects of the senses, is like nectar in the beginning, but it's like poison in the end. That it gives us some jolt, some rush, some level of, you could say, happiness or satisfaction, some pleasure. It'll give us some pleasure, let's say. But that pleasure is clearly destined to come to an end. And when it comes to an end, one feels dissatisfied. Right? One feels some kind, it's nectar in the beginning, it's poison in the end. That would be described as like the path of searching for happiness that leads to ultimately different forms of misery. And that's the path of Rajaguna, the path wherein we are influenced too much so by the mode of passion, right? The mode of passion, the very fundamental idea of the Rajaguna or the mode of passion is that we're convinced that we can't be happy with what we have. We need something more. Either we need what we don't have, or we need more of what we have. And so we can't be content or satisfied. As long as we are convinced of that, as long as that, and again, it's the mode of passion, it means that this energy is situated in different objects. As we move about this world, every object is composed of the three modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. But within every object, one of those energies dominates, and the influence from that object, it radiates from that object. So the influence of, for instance, I'll hear a certain song, and we'll call that an object in a sense, right? Now, that song, which is it's a vibration moving through the ether, right? If we have a radio, and there's a speaker on that radio, and that speaker vibrates, and then that speaker vibrates the ether, and that ether vibrates the eardrum, and so that sound is transferred from one place to another place, and ultimately transferred from my eardrum to my mind. Now my mind is going to become influenced, colored by the influence coming through that song. And it will be in one of three varieties, right? If it has a tamasic energy, it'll lead towards darkness. It'll lead towards misery. It'll influence me towards either laziness, inactivity or even destruction, right? Or even self-destruction. That's a music carrying a tamasic influence. And then if there's music that has a rajasic influence, then it's going to make me want something that I don't have. As my eardrum vibrates with that sound, and it starts to color my mind with an idea, with a feeling that there's something out there that I need, that I don't have right now, that I need to be satisfied. Let me search for it and let me connect my senses with it so that I will derive happiness from the object of the senses. And that's called passion, or the rajasic energies. That's the influence of the rajasic energy. And now if that song has a sattvic energy, right, then as it vibrates my eardrum, another color begins to influence my mind. And that influence would be, I'm content. I don't need more than I have right now. It's kind of the opposite of the Rajaguna, satisfaction, right? I'm content. Things are fine. I don't need anything external to find that happiness. I'm happy right now. And in that state, the mind becomes very lucid and clear. One can see things as they are rather than as they're not, because our attachments, the attachments that arise through the coloring of the Rajaguna, through the coloring of the mode of passion, they warp our perception of reality. They warp truth perception, right? Attachments warp truth perception. When I am attached to a particular idea, to a particular desire, to something that I want, it tends to warp my understanding of truth so that I will justify or rationalize or see things in a way that they aren't, in a way that they are not actually situated. Whereas from the Sattva Guna, I can see things as they actually are, right? I don't need this or that. Everything's okay. I don't even need to justify that. I can let go of this because my happiness isn't tied to it, right? This is a part of the wisdom of life. As I get older, I'm really focusing on this one, folks, that if you want to actually be happy and absorb your mind deeply in meditation and in spiritual substance, the mind has to settle. You have to let go of your attachments, even the ones that we've justified, even the ones that we feel are really important. And this is exactly what I'm supposed to be for. And it's totally justified and important and so on. You begin to realize my control is so little in this world, and I can spend my energy trying to control things. And in the end, they often don't go the way that I want to anyway. And even if they do, there's so much trouble created by that disturbance in relationships, disturbance in mind, and so on, that there's a lot in this world that I can really just let go of and let it be, right? That kind of thinking is generated out of the mode of goodness. I can be content without having everything be exactly the way that I think it should be. And we let go, right? And it's that type of thinker, right, that we call a Brahmana, right? Because their mind is situated in the Sattva Guna. It's situated in the mode of goodness. It gives them a clarity of thinking. And that clarity is the type of thinking that society needs to be driven by, right? So when we read here in Srila Prabhupada's commentary, he says, let me make sure I got the right one up. He says, the Brahmanas guide human society in becoming happy, right? We're all searching for happiness. But the Rajaguna and the Tamaguna ultimately don't lead to happiness. They may lead to some temporary pleasure, right? The Rajasic person is trying to find that pleasure through money, through sex, through reputation, through different sensual experiences. And the person in Tamagun, they may even just be finding their happiness in sleep, right? I just want to forget everything and go to sleep. Or through the destruction of something or someone, or even self-destruction, right? Whereas the sattvic person, the Brahmana, they're finding that because they've simplified everything, they're coming more in tune with truth, right? And truth is that I can be happy without any of these things. And that true happiness, it may be like poison in the beginning. I take a little austerity, but ultimately it leads to freedom. and the unveiling of the happiness that is my true nature. Right? So the society has to be guided by that. If society is not guided by that, if we can't learn to be satisfied simply, and that's the life of the Brahmana, right? That's the dharma of the Brahmana, that they live simply. Then we will compete with one another over limited resources and create conflict and anxiety. And that is basically the state of our world right now. It's like deep, deep, deep in there. You know, it's like we don't have, you know, Prabhupada would say that, you know, that the Kshatriyas are the rulers and they're guided by the Brahmanas. And here it's, and Prabhupada just kind of gave the clue here. He said the Brahmanas guide human society in becoming happy. How? By satisfying Lord Vishnu, right? That we need to connect with our divine source. And you need a group of people that are showing that example and that are speaking the truth in such a clear way that people are like, that makes sense, right? I've been trying to find happiness in all kinds of ways, but if I think about it, this person's right. It's always leading to poison in the end. And it's got us competing with one another. It's got us fighting over things that we don't need to fight about. It's got us totally distracted from the real goal of human life. We need to listen to these people. They're making a lot of sense. And then the rulers, the people that have that, maybe they're more ruled by the mode of passion, but there's a mix-in of sattva there that they're saying, let me listen to the wise people, and my reputation is based on how well I follow their lead. Then they begin to rule in such a way where you have some kind, it makes them, and now you can see, like, whether I don't want to get into a whole political thing, but if you just take one example, like you say, ecologically, where the world's at right now, it's like we're running off a cliff, but nobody can stop it because we're either paid off by corporations, or we know if I were to tell everyone the truth, the Brahmana steps in and tells the truth, right? Hey, just like a good doctor, you're really sick and you have to stop eating this kind of food right now and change your diet completely and start to exercise and do all these things that you don't want to do. And there's no leader that's willing to get up and say all those things right now because nobody would vote for them and nobody wants to accept all that. We're like children, right? And we're eating junk food and we're getting sick, and there's no adult in the room that's coming in and saying, you can't eat any more of that. And we're saying, like, well, then I don't vote for you as parent anymore. You know, like, you know, I want another parent that's going to give me all the candy that I want. That's where we are right now. You know, there's no head of the society. There's no adult in the room. So the Brahman is meant to be that adult in the room. So what is that Brahmana? What was Prabhupada's mission? Is actually Prabhupada, many times, like, he would arrive in a city, and then there'd be some television interviewer putting a microphone in his face and saying, like, well, why have you come here? You know, and he would often say, I've come here to try to create a group. This was the phrase that he would use, of first-class men, right? But by men, he meant men, women, whatever. He wanted to create a group of, and when he said first class, what he meant was that Brahminical consciousness. He wanted to share the knowledge that could elevate some people, a group of people, to that Brahminical level of thought, because he had the faith that if enough people can catch on to seeing life in this way, then they can influence the rest, right? So it's not that everybody has to become a Brahmana, but Prabhupada was trying to train us to take this up and to become Brahminical and to be able to speak the truth. And with each one of these divisions of society, these are Vedic roles in society. It became warped into what's called the caste system, where they lost the whole point, where people, just like we do with any good thing, people come along and they exploit it for selfish reasons, and then they screw things up. But the idea was that there are 4 different basic psychologies that people have. And those psychologies each come with strengths and weaknesses. and they each have a role that they can play together, to work together as a team. So along with the psychology that one has, then this system of social roles would provide for you the responsibilities that you embrace according to your psychology. And those responsibilities would help, they would do two things simultaneously. The duties that you would accept, on one hand, they would address the weaknesses in your own psychology and help you get over them and protect you from your lower nature. And at the same time, they would engage you in a valuable service to society that needs to be performed. And so I've given examples on this sometimes before, but for instance, we probably all know some people that are really good at making money. Wherever they look, they can see, I can make money this way. They can build up a business. They can become a millionaire. Even if it falls apart, they can build up another one and start it over again because they've got the drive and the aptitude and the intelligence to make money. So we call that a Vaishya. These are people that they run businesses. They employ others in their business. And people like that, that kind of clarity and determination and their ability to employ others, their ability to generate wealth, those can all be either misused or used correctly. Now, if that person doesn't have a wiser person speaking truth to them, then in most cases, that ability is going to lead deeper into greed, right? Greed becomes the weakness of that psychology. And we see that today, that even people that have more money than they can spend, they still feel they need to make more. Because if I'm a billionaire that's worth 10 billion, but I'm sitting at a table with 3 other billionaires worth 20, 30, and 40 billion, because the truth hasn't entered into my mind and I'm still ruled by Rajaguna, I think I need more, right? Until I'm the person sitting at the table with the most. And even if I harm other people to get that money, I'll justify it, I'll rationalize it, and I'll go down this dark path, right? Whereas if that same person with that same aptitude and that same skill and that same energy were trained under the Brahmana, they'd realize that my happiness does not come from having more than sitting at that other person at the table. But my happiness ultimately comes through service. And because I'm the primary moneymaker in this whole scheme, what I need to do is, one, make sure that my employees are situated well enough, right? That they're not suffering, that they're not going through that their care is my responsibility. And not only that, with the profits that I make, I should take care of my primary responsibilities of looking after my family and their needs. But beyond that, I should engage the profits, the fruits of my work in service of God, right? And that means in service to God's people as well. And when I'm doing that, then now my entire engagement, which before I understood all this was complete illusion, dragging me deeper into a dark world of greed. Now the same activities that I'm doing them not with a selfish motivation, but with a selfless motivation. It's connecting me to my divine source, and my consciousness, it's become a path of yoga, and my consciousness is becoming elevated, right? Now the warrior, their mentality is different. They're fearless, they're fighters, right? They're not afraid of conflict. They've got big egos, right? They got a predisposition, this is a very dangerous thing, predisposition to violence. Maybe we all know people like this too. They get a thrill out of violence, right? They're not afraid to engage in physical conflict. Dangerous, potentially. But if engaged properly, right? If they're like, and I often say that when I was a kid, I had friends that were just like that. They wanted to fight. They were fearless. That dangerous propensity can be engaged if they're clear thinkers, if there's Brahmanas that know how to engage that. You can't just pull that out of someone. It's too deeply ingrained in the mind. But what you can do is inspire them with a sense of dharma, a sense of duty, that my abilities should only be used to protect the innocent. And if they're ever used for other purposes, I'm really become the lowest person, right? My duty is to protect others. And whatever pride they have, let that be their pride, right? Not just I'm the baddest guy, but I'm the protector, right? I'm the humble protector. And when the Brahmins walk in, I actually get down on the ground, I bow down to them, because it's their wisdom that is keeping everything together. It's their wisdom that's preventing me from becoming ruled by my lower nature. So I respect the Brahmanas, right? And now the Brahmanas, they're the ones that are the most sattvic of all. They're the ones that are the most influenced by the mode of goodness. And because of that, they have the potential to live very simply. Because they're satisfied with the simple things in life. They're satisfied with a simple home. They're satisfied with simple food. They're satisfied simply reading their books and contemplating the wisdom that's there. They don't need some big thrill. They don't need some, all the ridiculous, you walk to Las Vegas and you see all this just garbage trying to that people are trying to find some satisfaction out of. I need the music and the lights and the casino and and all this stuff. The Brahmana looks at it and says, there's no happiness in that. I can sit here and read my Bhagavad Gita and I can feel waves of happiness just washing over my body, because I'm connecting with that divine source, the source of all, the source of all pleasure. Right? So the duty of the Brahmana is that their words should never be corrupted, right? They need to be able to speak the truth under all circumstances. And so therefore their duty is to live very simply, is that they need to be satisfied with just the hut, with the simple home. They need to be satisfied with the simple clothes. They need to be satisfied with the simple lifestyle. Because if someone could come along and pay them something more, if they can become confused, and then their ability to speak the truth will be corrupted. And if you've ever met people like this in life, people that have detachment, compassion, and the freedom and the integrity to speak the truth, even if sometimes it seems like it's working against their best interest, they speak it because it's the truth. That's the key, that the Brahmana is the speaker of the truth. There's, in the Chandogya Upanishad, there's a story of a boy, his name was Satyakarma, and he was approaching a sage named Gautama, right? I see Gorsharan nodding. Oh yeah, you grew up with these stories, right? No? Okay. But the story is that Gautama is a very respected Brahmana, a very respected teacher, and he's surrounded by his students. Generally, his students would have been raised in Brahmana families because he's training them to be Brahmanas, right? But this boy approaches, and he's just a young boy, like 8 years old or something like that. And he says to Gautama, he says, "Oh, master, I've come to you to become your disciple and to be trained by you. Please accept me, as your servant and as your student." And Gautama says, "Okay, child, tell me who are your parents? Because he's just a little kid. Who are your parents?" And this is what he said. He said, "I'm sorry, but I don't know to which family I belong, and even my mother doesn't know. I've asked her in the past, who's my father?" And she says, I guess she was kind of living a free lifestyle, And so she was like, I can't really say who your father is. Now, in that society that he was living in, that would have been considered an embarrassing admission to have to say. I mean, in one sense, it might be today too, but especially then, where morality and dharma were such central parts of the social fabric, right? So when he said that, the other disciples are looking around at each other saying, "Oh, well, look at his background. You know, he's not like one of us. We've been trained as Brahmanas. We've been qualified as his students because of the training we've received from our very pure lineages of, you know, family lineages that we're coming in. So I don't think that the guru is going to accept him as being qualified to be a disciple, right? But then Gautama said something very interesting, and I shared this for those that are on Patreon. I shared an image of this a week or two ago. What Gautama said is that a person who speaks the truth without hesitation or fear, that person is a Brahmana, right? For this boy, he could have tried to hide it. He could have lied. He could have tried to avoid the subject. But he just said straight out, you asked me, and I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't know who my father is. My mother doesn't know who my father is. That's the family that I grew up in. And whereas the disciples that didn't have as deep realization of these principles, they said, well, I guess he's probably not going to be accepted. But the person that deeply understood the principles said, the real qualification is not what family you're born in. The family that you're born in will likely influence you. But that's not the point. The point is, are you a true Brahmin? Are you a true seeker of truth? You know, and that is, and that in this case was demonstrated through his ability to speak the truth, even if the consequences were embarrassing, or even if the consequences of that truth seemed to work against his best interest. He was honest. He had that integrity. Okay, you're the Brahmana, right? That's what he saw as the Brahmana. So we may not, in our day and age, in our lifetimes, we may not see a Vedic civilization manifest the ways described in these ancient texts. We may. I'm not saying we won't. You know, it's possible. You know, this whole industrial complex could collapse, and we may all be living on farms, and Prabhupada's books' influence can grow. And I believe they will in some way. I don't know. I can't say I have the vision to understand what the future looks like. But I do believe it'll go in this positive direction. And how long it takes, I don't know. But the point is that there are principles from these teachings that we can apply in our lives. And we may be like the money maker in society. And then if that's the case, then we should be, with humility and eagerness, we should be approaching people that are Brahminical to help us guide our lives well, and to help us understand things well, to help us not be ruled by our lower nature. And at the same time, Prabhupada wanted to train a group of people to be Brahminical, to embrace that lifestyle, to embrace simplicity, to embrace truth, peacefulness, you know, cleanliness, you know, etc. Of course, there's the verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Samodhamas tapas saucham, shantir arjavam evacha, jnanam vigyanam astikyam, brahma karmasvabhavajam, that these are the qualities of the Brahmana, that they're peaceful, they're self-controlled, they live austerely, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which the Brahmanas work. So as you know, with the goal of increasing Brahminical culture in this world, as well as if we're approaching life as a bhakti yogi, if we identify as a bhakti yogi, as a Vaishnava, then these qualities are also natural in the Vaishnava, that we should be cultivating these qualities and respecting it. And when we see these qualities in someone, we should naturally feel and show respect, you know. And if we create that kind of culture, even if that is a small culture within a larger culture, but the more that we can develop that kind of culture, the more that we can uplift ourselves, and the more that we can uplift our general society. So I will stop here. I haven't been looking at the chat board, but there may be questions. But Gaur Sharan, would you like to take those questions for me? Is that how we should work?
Yes, bro. You can check in the chat also.
Okay.
From Jiva, there is a question.
Okay. So the question from Jiva, my old friend, is, so if we strive to find happiness in sattvic energies with discipline and training in a rajasic mood, striving and achieving, are we then acting in sattvic energies? Okay, that's a good question. And you know, I think we have to study this in depth to understand it's a sattvic person, although they have contentment, their contentment manifests in detachment, but not in inactivity, right? It means I'm happy with what I've got, but I'm willing to use all my energy and all my determination to serve. And so so I guess this is just the point that I want to make. Let's not confuse being sattvic with being idle or something like that. But it just means I'm detached. I'm not trying to take results for myself, but I may be very eager to create results as service for God, and therefore I may be very dynamic in my service. So you said that if we're doing that through, one could get into austere living, austere practices. And it could be rajasic. We might even be confusing ourselves, thinking like, I'm going to become the most Brahminical and I'm living the most austere and I'm doing this and that. But really what we're searching for is maybe prestige, maybe power of some type, so it can become confused for sure. So we need to be careful, but we also need to understand the real essence of what it is. That the person influenced by rajasic energy is saying, I'm not happy until I get more. And the person that's influenced by the sattvic energy is like, I'm ready to work real hard, but not for myself, because I'm satisfied with what I have, but I do this to serve. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay. There's another question also by Minna.
Minna, another newer friend. She was my old friend. Minna's my newer friend. Is there a way to constantly stay in sattva? I find that the change of influences between each guna throughout my day is very subtle, is a very subtle thing that I don't even notice. Is there a more effective way to slow down, unidentify the mind emotions, and realize that it's just the modes influencing me? That's a very good question. And, yes, there is. But how to apply it is the question. Now, I have a book, interesting book. It's called, I was in a Ras Bihari Lal bookstore in Vrindavan, and they got like all these books in there. And I found this old, dusty book. It looked like it was printed in the 1950s or something in India. And I think it was called something like The Lifestyle of the South Indian Brahmanas, right? These are people that are just, their goal is to stay, just what you're saying. I want to stay in sattva guna all the time. And enlisted how the day goes from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep. And all the rituals that they do and all the meditations that they say. When they wake up, first thing in the morning, there's the mantra and the prayer to God and to Lord Vishnu, and then the first step that they take from their bed onto the floor, they don't do it with their left foot. They put their right foot on the foot because they're putting their foot on the earth. So even as they're doing that, they're praying to Mother Earth. Dear Mother Earth, please forgive me for putting my foot on you. And please bless me that every step that I take in this day will be dedicated to the service of your Lord Vishnu, right? And then as they get up to take their bath, they're also meditating on certain mantras. And then they sit down and do this type of meditation. And then they do, and the whole day is laid out. Now, most of us aren't prepared to live such a strict regimen. We do meet some people that are into it, But the point is, how will I wake up? Should there be something I do the first thing I wake up? How should I eat? When I prepare my food, what kind of consciousness do I have to prepare, to put into it? At the times of the changing of the day, in the morning, in the noon, in the evening, is there something that I can do to kind of bring me back to that? This is what Srila Prabhupada's morning program was. It wasn't just to bring someone to Sattva Guna, but it's all Sattva Guna, like, let me offer my prayers to the Guru. Let me take darshan of the deities. Let me worship Tulsi and walk around Tulsi. Let me put things into my life that keep me on track. And Brahmanas were very fixed, these real Brahmanas, they were very fixed in how they protected that sattva guna. I'm not going to eat food that's not cooked by someone whose mind is impure, right? That's a big one, I'm not going to engage my mind in Rajasic and Tamasic forms of energy that generally you're going to find in television, music, and all these different things. So if we're determined, now at the same time, let's face it, we're living in New York City or in the Western world. These energies are powerful, and I could spend my whole day just trying to protect my sattva-guna like that. But ultimately, as devotees, we're engaged in Krishna service, right? That's Shuddha Sattva energy. That's the most important. Now, we may find that in my attempts to serve that I feel a little overwhelmed by Rajas or Tamas. Then we address that. We can adjust the lifestyle. We can just begin to chant mantras in our mind. There's so many ways that we can address it. So this tradition will give you the tools to do that. But the fact is, but if you want one simple thing for me to say, regulation. Regulation is the way of the Brahmana. I'm going to do this when I wake up. I'm going to do this a little bit later. I'm going to do this at midday. I'm going to do this in the evening. And before I go to sleep, I'm going to do this. Regulation is very important. Regulation is important. Like people that know Ayurveda, they know how important regulation is for the health. That I eat at regular times, I sleep at regular times. That's living in Sattva-guna, and it gives physical health. Similarly, if you look at Prabhupada, he was traveling around the world as an elderly man, constantly on the road, but he would still wake up at the same time, do the same thing, take his massage at a certain time, eat at a certain. He kept that regulation. We tend to let stuff like that go. But actually, and it feels like, to a lot of us, it feels like I'm getting locked into something here. I don't want to be locked into something. But actually, that getting locked in is what leads to freedom, because Sattva-guna is the only freedom. Otherwise, that Rajas and Tamas lock us down. So regulation is very important. I'll share that. We have 2 minutes left. Is there another quick question that I should take, Sharan, Prabhu?
Yes, bro, you can take. There are 2 more questions.
Okay, we'll take 2 more quickly.
Yeah, bro.
Which ones are everything?
Amazing. The answer was really amazing.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. You are a living manifestation of the mode of goodness. I'm looking at you and I'm just feeling elevated in my consciousness.
No,
Totally.
bro,
I'm not just saying that. I mean it.
Struggling here.
What question should I take now?
There's one question by Jaya, like Varna Shankara issue. There's another one that I had put. You can choose whichever one.
Just read them to me and I'll answer.
How do we know if a person is speaking truth because he is in mode of goodness, or he is immature or fanatic?
How do we know if a person is speaking truth because he's in the mode of goodness or he's immature or fanatic? I see what you're saying. So in other words, speaking truth is important, but sometimes we need to be careful that we don't harm or damage with our words. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Yeah. Truth, the Gita will speak about the austerity of speech, and it means that we speak truth, but also it means that we're careful how we speak too, because we're very conscious of how our words affect the minds and hearts of other people. And so we can recognize, hopefully we can recognize, sometimes we just need to slow down a little bit. I know the way that I grew up, and Jiva's there with me, right? As kids, we respected what we thought was good. Was someone speaking the truth and just getting in your face and saying it and not caring about what the result was. They're speaking the truth. And if that disturbs you, well, then get ready to get disturbed. And the more disturbed you are, probably the better I feel about it. There's a little bit of that's in there, right? That's cooler. That's still better, But actually the wise people, they're always looking for the best result. They can move through this world creating harmony rather than creating conflict. And if we see that a person speaking truth is creating lots of conflict, then it may be that they're fanatic or immature. Whereas a person that's speaking truth and creating unity, creating harmony, then that's coming from the mode of goodness. Because the mode of goodness preserves and the mode of ignorance destroys, So that maybe that could be helpful. And there's one more question from Jaya.
Yeah. The question is, maybe now I think everybody can unmute themselves if Jaya wants to ask personally.
Can you hear me?
Yes, bro.
Oh, is that Jaya? Okay, I didn't know which Jaya was. Prabhu.
For my camera on, sorry.
My obeisances to you.
I was wondering about often when we talk about the Varnas, as psychological types or as occupations, we kind of like gloss over the Varnasankara issue.
Okay.
And the reality is, well, it seems to me that the reality is that most of the population today would likely fall into that particular category of Varnasankara. And that's why there's so much psychological confusion.
Right.
And according to Arjuna's analysis, such people basically bring about hell on earth, which is definitely what it looks like to me, what's going on.
I'm with you.
So with that being in place, I don't know. I just often wonder how much emphasis we need to actually put on the psychological types because we're products of Varnasankara versus just like, only bhakti is going to really work in this situation. And you kind of do what you need to do to like live and to satisfy simple desires. But basically it's just bhakti that's going to really be functioning now because of the social situation.
Yeah, it's a great point. And just to make clear for some of the listeners, Varnasankara means people in this age that were not raised in any of these, were not trained in any of these, and are likely very confused, and or we could even say low class in so many different ways. So they're not embracing the mentalities or the duties that are provided for any of these segments of society. And if that is the case, which it seems to be, like most of us are born into families and we aren't trained to embrace these things, we may get some of it in some way, but not in a formal way. Is it better that we just not give so much emphasis to all this and focus on the practicing bhakti? Because bhakti is that powerful influence that can purify and change everything. Simply by remembering Krishna, we become pure. So should I just focus on that? And, I think it's a good question, Jaya. And I think it can be applied different. I think this is where the guru is the doctor and is looking in the medicine chest and at the disease of the individual and prescribing for them what will be effective and what won't be effective. What medicine will actually, heal one, improve one, and what won't. Right now, I'm looking, and I think I'm seeing Vasudev Prabhu, and he's worshiping Radha Muralidhar. And I'm sorry if I'm holding everyone from that darshan. But here's a person that the Brahminical qualities, the Brahminical lifestyle has become an important part of his life and is facilitating his meditation on Krishna and his bhakti. Right now, there may be someone else that to try to impose that lifestyle on them wouldn't facilitate it and would just disturb them and turn them off and send them away, and they would get frustrated and so on. So ultimately we want to bring the mind to Krishna, and that's really the purpose of Varna and Ashrama, is it's all meant to bring the mind to Krishna. If it's doing that purpose, then let's embrace it. If it's not helping that, then let's let go and focus on the essence, which is pure bhakti. And how to apply that best with any individual, I think, is a judgment call that's going to come from someone with experience. I can say this: Prabhupada sure seemed to emphasize this stuff a lot in his books. He's talking about it a lot. He's also sharing that ultimately bhakti is the essence of it all, and is really the only true answer. Maybe to sum it up, I know that once, in one conversation with Prabhupada, he was talking about Varnashrama, and someone more or less brought up the point that you brought up, like, well, isn't just chanting Hare Krishna the answer to all of this? And Prabhupada's answer was, but who will do it, right? If our mind is so distracted, if we're moving through this world so confused and so distracted and without any attention to living by these principles, will we actually have a mind that's settled enough to become absorbed in the holy name? And so I hope that's, somewhat useful, and that ultimately it's a valuable culture with a lot of valuable principles, but how we apply it will require some judgment. And ultimately, it's useless if it doesn't lead to meditation on Krishna, which is the goal of it all. Thank you so much. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for being here with me this morning. Gorsharam Prabhu, thank you for the invitation. And I'm so happy seeing everyone, and I'm always looking forward to the day. When will that day come? I guess patience is one of the qualities that we need to cultivate too, right? But when will that day come when we can all be together more?
Yes.
So thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Hari Om Tat Sat. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.